1949, the Catholic monk and writer Thomas Merton wrote, "If you want to understand the social and political history of modern man, study hell." About 60 years later, an unknown but equally sage soul commanded a nation. Yippin' hell, Furpocalypse. With those two pieces of wisdom, I'd like to wish you all a very, very warm welcome to heck. I'm Baz, and in this next hour or so, I'll be your Green Grim Reaper, and we're going to look at the rich history of American media depicting anthros in the underworld. So we're going to check out examples spanning decades, from Looney Tunes to Rocko's modern life, and check out some examples from the furry community, like Jack and Pinky and Pepper Forever. And then our final segment will be a deep dive into the theology of Bitsy Bob. I am completely serious, I promise. Now, throughout this, by the end of tonight's presentation, we're going to find out what it means, welcome in, we're going to find out what it means when we send funny animals to the bad place. Now, fair warning before we get started, we're going to look at a lot of imagery with cartoony violence and gore. There's mentions of suicide and substance abuse. There's plenty of imagery from Christianity, and exactly one homophobic slur. It'll make more sense when we get there.
We'll get
there. We'll get there. Now, but if any of that freaks you out, that's totally fine. Now is a perfectly fine time to jump, and I thank you so much for coming. And for everyone else, let's set a framework for what kind of hell we're talking about tonight, right? Because the religious inspiration for this imagery didn't start with cartoons. It stretches back way further than that. We've got to mention non-Western cultures. For example, Egyptian mythology is a big source. But if we want to talk about the real fire and brimstone, a lot of that comes from Judeo-Christian texts like the Bible. Shouts out the Bible. Now, so the thing is, the Bible doesn't actually describe hell in that much detail. The book of Matthew refers to it as the outer darkness with weeping and gnashing of teeth. It's really metal, but it doesn't actually get to the whole pitchforks, minotaurs, none of the sexy stuff, right? So where does that come from? A lot of that is from Dante's Inferno. So here is Dante as depicted by Botticelli, and here is Dante from Morbidity. I think I like this one more, right? Yeah, this one's way better. But if you haven't read the Divine Comedy, it's Dante's epic poem about a pilgrim's travels through purgatory, hell, and heaven. And the first part, Inferno, is full of anthro creatures. You've got minotaurs and all those flying beasts. A lot of inspiration comes from Greek and Roman mythology, but this imagery laid out in the Inferno would come to influence centuries of Christian art and ultimately ideology. There's a great book called Inventing Hell that talks about how it was this imagery spawned from this book that Christians would later adapt to kind of put people into fear with for centuries. This is kind of things like your pastor would bring up, And later depictions of hell would often involve anthro characters dealing out punishments. So I've got this from Pizzoli over here, The Last Judgment. You've got kind of this goat-looking dude over here. And then you've also got things like, Hieronymus Bosch, Garden of Earthly Delights. This bird dude straight up bores sinners. Pretty impressive. Now, let's fast forward half a millennia of Christian cultural hegemony later, and this imagery has fully infiltrated pop culture and hijacked our perceptions of morality and theology forevermore. Okay, that's a lot for a Saturday night, I get it, right? But my hope by taking this little deep dive before this is to show you that none of this was handed down from on high or whatever. It was just random dudes drawing this art, creating this mythos. And as queer people, we have seen how this imagery has been wielded against us by our parents, pastors, weirdo protesters outside furry conventions. We've seen this before, right? But I think by seeing this, the origins of it, it'll make more sense when we see how cartoons tonight either play it straight or subvert it. And as we're gonna see, these cartoon furry versions of hell say way more about ourselves than about any particular religious doctrine. So let's watch our first cartoon of the night, Looney Tunes, Satan's Waitin. So this is a Fritz Freeling short from 1954. You've got Sylvester trying to catch Tweety like usual, only this time Sylvester dies in the process. And fortunately, Satan himself gives Sylvester 9 lives to try and catch him once and for all. Let's see how he uses those 9 lives. We're gonna watch the whole cartoon.
Ooh.
So here we go. Let's watch Satan's Waitin.
Welcome, pussycat. What's your name, pussycat? Sylvester. Sylvester? Let's see now. Sam, Seymour, Stanley. Here it is. Sylvester. Ooh. My, we've been a bad pussycat, haven't we? Too bad that pussycat's got 9 lives. You'll have to wait for the other 8. So sit over there and wait for them. You won't have long to wait. I'll hurry him along. This is a safe place. I can live here for years. Careful with that nitro, see? Don't worry. I know how to handle it. You used too much, Muggsy. Now he tells them.
Great. First hell cartoon of the night. That one is so macabre if you think about it. It's really only because of how cute Sylvester is that we're like, oh yeah, our main character in this cartoon is going to hell 9 times in a row. That's cool. I love the sense of scale and everything. I've compared sort of stalactites and volcanic imagery to Gustave Doré's woodcut illustrations for Dante's Inferno. There's a lot of that sort of imagery at play here, classic hell theming. I also love that in the traditional human depictions of hell, anthro creatures are punishing humans. But in all the cartoons we're watching tonight, anthro creatures are the ones dealing out the punishments as well as our audience surrogates. We're meant to feel bad for Sylvester, at least a little, even if we know that what he's doing is not exactly morally okay. Like all tunes, Sylvester is led entirely by his id, right? He's led by his most base impulses to do things he knows will cause him suffering, but he does them anyway. Sounds like a furry convention to me. So, let's watch another cat who spent one of his 9 lives downstairs. 9 lives of Fritz the cat. You might have seen this clip on Blue Sky. You might have seen it. Now, 9 Lives of Fritz the Cat is a movie that bravely asks, what if Fritz the Cat sucked? So if you're not familiar with this character, Fritz the Cat was a counterculture cartoon character created by the iconic pervert R. Crumb. And then a few years later, in the late 60s, Ralph Bakshi, fellow iconic pervert, turned Fritz into the first X-rated animated movie. Then a few years later, in the 70s, we get this sequel where Fritz is married with kids. And this is the Hell panel. Nice to meet you. So in this, Fritz is married with kids, and when his wife starts berating him for being irresponsible, he he starts daydreaming about all these lives he could have led instead. The final daydream he has takes place in the sewers of New York City, and he meets a very specific guy. Oh yeah, I should mention, that one homophobic slur I mentioned would be here. Let's watch.
That you voted for Nixon. Did you by any chance, Mr. Smartass, pop some of my birth control pills? Oh, shit. Ralphie just peed on my shoes.
Christ, is it refreshing to get away from the pressures of the street? There's much to be said for the advantages of isolation. It allows one total freedom to pick and choose without the forces of society that wear you down. Hey, we'll take the example of the influence of our present-day culture. It typifies humanity's lack of personal concern for others. Hey, fuck you inconsiderate bastards! You just sit there on your fat asses and dump on life indiscriminately. I suppose I should learn to accept the minuscule distractions in life, though. Oh, shit. Hey, Jesus, this stuff is dynamite. The eyes of my own soul staring back at me. God knows I've lived the best lives I was capable of. My minor infractions of society's rules were only due. Oh, please, Lucifer, don't take me. I'm not ready. I'll change. I'm already changing. Look at me change. Oh my God, what a way to go.
Excuse me, certainly, hello? You who down there? Excuse me, but did anyone find an earring? I mean, I dropped my earring in the trash. You'd recognize it. It opens on one side. It's kind of a jade color. It's got a picture of Errol Flynn and Alan Hale naked.
Jesus Christ! Lucifer's a faggot!
Jesus Christ, my life is shit.
So that warning made sense, right? I'm gonna be so real with you right now.
Of course he's laughing.
Half the reason I pitched this panel was to show that clip. Now, just like the Looney Tunes clip we saw before, we see that Fritz uses anthro characters to portray both the devil and the people that he's tormenting. And in this version of Hell, Lucifer is a stereotype of a femme gay man. Even in the counterculture where Fritz began, queer people back in the 60s and 70s were viewed as something inherently other and monstrous. And you can see this reflected in his design. You know, Fritz is a typical cat, right? But then Lucifer is a mix of a few different elements. You've got a cat's muzzle with these pointed bird feet and the wings. It's very Lucifer here. He doesn't fit neatly into narrow boxes of biology. And that is really what freaks Fritz out the most about this, even more so than just the concept of hell here. We're not meant to completely identify with Fritz here, but I do think this scene does a really good job of unintentionally reflecting hetero anxieties around queerness post-Stonewall. So you can see here how when cartoons use hell, they're not only talking about just theology, it's often a reflection of our own world and what the writers were most fearful of at the time. So this juxtaposition of biblical hell and earthly queer culture is going to be a running theme throughout tonight's clips. So before we dive more into that aspect of it, let's watch one more classic cartoon where it has a similarly irreverent take on the underworld. Rocko's Modern Life. Season 1, to Heck and back, Heifer has an overeating problem. Rocko confronts him on it. Heifer goes to Heck. Let's watch.
Welcome to Heck.
a friendly community.
I am the Dark Underlord, the Prince of Doom, the King of Eternal Torment. I am fear. I am evil. They call me Peaches.
Peaches? Would you let me finish?
You will rot in torment forever.
Peaches? Okay, Heifer. Oh, that's a good name. What was I saying?
7 deadly sins. Gluttony! Glutton! You are a glutton!
Gluten?
Now turn to channel 3.
Sure. Where's the remote?
You poor fool. Still don't know where you are, do you? There is no remote! You think that's scary? Well, how about this?
Alright, so like Looney Tunes and the other ones so far, we've got an anthro sinner who gets frightened and humiliated by another anthro creature. And like Looney Tunes or Fritz, this would be so morbid if this was being depicted in live action, but it's cartoon animals, so we're cool with it. So now that we've looked at decades of furry hell in classic cartoons, let's look at how the furry community has used this imagery. Freed from the constraints of corporate media, these versions of heck are a lot more gruesome and horny than what we've seen before. They also use the archetypes of hell to comment on the various taboos and dilemmas we face today. And dude, if there is a taboo, this comic has talked about it. This is an older furry webcomic from the 2000s called Jack. It's by the author David Hopkins, and its title character is a green rabbit Grim Reaper. So throughout the comic, we watch him recover his memories of life before hell and talk to various furry demons and sinners. One of Jack's most infamous storylines is Act 2, Angry Brian. So in this one, Brian is, angry. I don't really know how else to put it. So angry that the character shoots up his high school. I'm not going to show any screen caps from that sequence, but it is very vividly rendered, I'll tell you that. So once he finishes the deed, the souls of his dead classmates drag Brian down to hell, where Jack reaps his soul, and Angry Brian is tormented forever after. So, yeah, this is a pretty bonkers plot for a furry webcomic. I think it's also worth pointing out that this arc was originally published in 1999. What else happened in 1999 about like schools and violence and something? I'm blanking. I don't know. It'll come to me at some point. Now, posting this months after Columbine takes a massive amount of chutzpah, and that is something this comic has a lot of. Like, let's look at this arc 8, Games We Play in Hell. So we meet this character named Silver Blue. She is a sinner who has spent 125 years in this Groundhog Day style loop of agony and torment. So Jack helps free her from this cycle by helping Silver confront the patterns and actions that led her to hell in the first place. Now, it's a good arc, but there's this one detail that I haven't been able to stop thinking about, so I need to infect you with it as well. Okay, so Silver Blue lives in an apartment building known as the Oblong Tomb. Okay, what do you think the Oblong Tomb looks like? Just imagine it in your head. Don't say it out loud, just imagine it, and then hold that image in your head. Are you imagining the Twin Towers? Because that's what it is, literally. Okay, so in the universe of Jack, one of the towers went to heaven. Oh my. Oh yeah. So here's when this comic came out. February 2002. David Hopkins, master of timing, I gotta say. Now, referencing real-world events in depictions of hell is nothing new. Dante did that a lot in the Inferno, actually. And what's something that I really enjoy about Jack is how he references various real-life furries as well, some of whom you may recognize. Like, let's look at this guy. Who's this alcoholic cockroach giving a wedding toast in this arc? Why? It's our glorious leader, Uncle Kage. Now, that is an actual picture of him. That was on Google Images. Now, or who is this cutie pie labeled the ranting talent agent?
Oh no.
Oh, it's 2 Griffin, of course. Oh, wrong picture. I'm so sorry. Let me fix that real quick. There we go. So sorry about that. Now, looking at this art, you probably noticed a very specific vintage furry art style to everything. It's kind of like, I would describe it as like an Archie Sonic character shopping at Spencer's. It's also, have you ever seen that one picture of Tails from Sonic wearing a 9 Inch Nails shirt? Jack, as a webcomic, is this for like 15 years. So if you like this image, read this comic. Now, I don't think Jack is a lost classic or anything, but I do think it is an extremely important work in the history of furry hell. It makes a case that furry comics can be a vehicle to talk about theology and ethics. Does it do a good job of that? I'm gonna leave that up to you, but I think it takes a big swing, and I gotta respect it. A later furry comic that I think handles this territory with greater tact is coming up right now. This is Pinky and Pepper Forever. This is a graphic novel from 2018 by the artist Eddie Adams. Eddie has talked about his connections to both the furry and Therian communities before. He actually sold this piece at a con earlier this year. I wish I got this one. So this comic takes its characters from a short-lived line of dolls called Pinky Cooper and the Jet Set Pets. The guy who made these dolls also made Bratz, so that's why they look like that. In this comic, these dogs go from fashionista girl bosses into sad, horny art students. These are real like boy genius listeners over here. So in this comic, they meet and fall madly for each other at their art school, finding common ground in art and S&M. And there's genuine affection here, but their relationship is also super codependent and tumultuous. There's signs that there's a breaking point coming. And it happens halfway through the comic when Pinky uses Pepper's bondage gear for a performance art piece without her permission. Now, Pinky is confronted by this by Pepper, and Pinky is furious about this, so she decides to commit suicide, turning her death into one last piece of performance art. Pepper is distraught by this, and then they both commit suicide so Pepper dies in order to meet Pinky again in hell. So they meet up in hell, and the relationship continues from there. This sounds kind of heavy, and it is, but the art style and the humor of it is such a breath of fresh air. It's really unlike any other furry comic I've read. I highly recommend it. And to give you a greater idea of what this comic is like, I put together a brief video featuring an interview Eddie did with the cartoonist Carta O'Neill in 2019. So let's watch that.
It deals with a lot of like very overtly religious themes, and something that I know about you is that you are personally religious.
I'm not very practiced in it, but it's left its impression on me that is unshakable. So, you know, I went to Catholic school, all girls, do the math. Religious symbology is important to me. There's some deep-rooted evil in it too that I find useful to tap into when making horror and like when drawing about these crazy feelings like, I'll die for you, I'll sacrifice anything for this relationship.
So in Pinky and Pepper, both characters go to hell, and like their relationship sort of continues on unfazed. Like they go to hell, and it's sort of like they both got jobs at Target. But like a lot of the specifics of like hell and what you focus on as scary, like seems deeply personal to you.
Yeah. I really like the idea of a personal hell. If anyone's like familiar with the Hellraiser franchise, like I really like how like, you know, the devil will make hell personal to you, and that's art, you know, like, ooh, what's gonna torture you the most? So I think that's true in Pinky and Pepper. They're haunted by their past. Like Pinky's suicide is in a bathtub, and there's an evil bathtub walking around on 4 claw feet with a face, and a bathroom with a tongue that would lick you when you sit down, and just repulsive stuff that's like kind of goofy and like Brave Little Toaster-ish, but like it's like deeply scary to me because it's like, I don't know, it's just funny, like it's just gross. So I'm interested in my own personal hell.
I love what Eddie had to say about our own personal hell, because every example tonight, the version of hell really reflects the fears and anxieties of its creators. So Eddie talked about how his upbringing in school kind of inspired a lot of the imagery you can see in these comics. And you can also see various influence from some of the art we talked about earlier tonight. Like compare this piece from Hieronymus Bosch to this panel in the comic. It's equal parts Satan and Sanrio. And where else are you gonna get that, really? So I brought my copy of the book if you want to check it out after the panel. It's also free on Silver Sprocket's website, that's the publisher. I think more than any of the other examples so far, I think this comic does the best job of using anthro characters in hell as a way to tackle difficult subjects like trauma and violence, queer relationships, so much. It's really impressive. Okay, we've got one more example tonight. I think you know what it is. So, this is the 3rd time I've presented this panel. The first time I did it was at Anthro New England this year. And the day that I did that, the first 4 episodes of Hazbin dropped on Amazon Prime. And I thought the show was going to flop. I did, legitimately. And then it didn't at all. It's got songs with hundreds of millions of streams, already renewed through season 4. If we're talking about strictly metrics, this Hazbin Hotel and Helluva Boss are the most popular forms of furry hell ever. They're also the most controversial for a variety of reasons, more than I can fit into this panel. And let's be clear for a second. There is a lot of legitimate critique to be had with Bitsy Pop's work. That said, I think both shows, both Hazbin and Helluva Boss, have become something of a sin eater for the animation community. You post one positive thing about either show, and people assume that you're the cartoon beatbox guy. If you know, you know.
Not the 50K animation.
So, I think it would be way too easy to talk about these shows from a apologetic, defensive place, like, sorry guys, I know it's cringe, but we gotta talk about it. Fuck that. These shows have so much more to them than I think get credit, and I think talking about it in a dismissive way is unfair to both of us, as well as to the talented furries who work on these shows. So, for the final part of tonight's panel, we're gonna talk about both Hazbin and Helluva Boss and figure out their place in the pantheon of furry hell. So before we watch a clip, let's take a bird's eye view of Bitsy Pop's vision of the underworld, right? So, like in Dante's Inferno, this version of hell is split into 7 rings, each one based after the 7 deadly sins. And in both shows, hell is modeled after various earthly excesses. So we've got the lust ring, which is modeled after an Earth City's red light district. You've got a lot of neon signs, solicitations for sex work. You've got the Wrath Ring, which has your classic volcanic sort of imagery for hell, mixed with the kind of desert landscapes of a Roadrunner cartoon. And then the Greed Ring lampoons various forms of earthly greed, like trashy theme parks or the Mafia. So, hellborn demons can travel across all of these rings, but sinners from Earth are stuck in the Pride Ring, which is where Hazbin takes place. And I think about that is our sinners are former humans who took on new forms in the afterlife. Some of them include Angel Dust and Husk over here. Bibsy Pop says that the form you take in hell is a reflection of the life you led on Earth. So I don't know how Angel Dust became a spider with what he's got, but I don't know. So he lived his life on Earth in a very interesting way. So that's why he's here. Now, in the Pride Ring, the Angels of Heaven cull the population every year in what is known as the Extermination. And Hazbin Hotel follows Lucifer's daughter, Charlie, as she tries to stop these exterminations from happening. So we're going to watch the first song in the first episode of Hazbin Hotel, which I think will give you a good example of how this show depicts the underworld. And we can talk about the differences between how this talks about it versus other shows. So let's watch Happy Day in Hell.
There's a warm, fuzzy feeling that wafts through the air. Every street so revealing, it's hard not to stare. It's a realm so appealing, it beats anywhere. If you don't mind the smell, it's a happy day in hell. Hi, mister.
Go fuck yourself!
I can already tell. Today is gonna be a fucking happy day.
So that song does a really good job setting up the show's perspective on hell. It's super irreverent. It takes murder and cannibalism and makes it about as mundane as the trash going out. We also see plenty of great furry background characters. I have compiled some of my favorites here. I am totally normal. Now, like in 9 Lives of Fritz the Cat, this show draws an explicit connection between queer-coded furries and depictions of hell. So like here, for example, we've got Charlie peeping in on your average Furpocalypse room party. You can see more queer and kinky furries in, say, this bondage scene over here, or during the show's most popular song, Poison, which almost reached the Billboard Hot 100, which is insane. That's like, for this show. Now, I've seen a few folks in the discourse who have described this show's correlation of queer culture with Christian depictions of hell as being kind of a backhanded compliment, sort of serving as, wait, what are you trying to say about this community if we're linking it to hell exactly? But speaking, at least anecdotally, I have many friends, many of whom are here, who have found the show's depiction of queerness as more invigorating and liberating rather than sort of putting into a box, rather, a stigmatization. I think a major part of why this is because unlike other depictions of queerness in hell, like Fritz the Cat, in here, we're meant to identify with the characters in here, both the demons and the sinners. There's something in there that we're all meant to sort of look at and find pieces of ourselves in, which I think adds a large degree of empathy to the show. Now, let's compare the themes of Hazbin and Helluva to prior forms of furry hell. So, similar to the webcomic Jack that we talked about, the major through line in both shows is redemption. Can someone change? Can someone go from hell to heaven? In Helluva, we see the character Blitzo kind of grappling with his deeds. He wasn't a sinner from Earth, he was a demon born in hell. But we had an episode just a few months ago where literally called Apology Tour, where he grapples with the things he's done. Or if you've seen the most recent episode of Helluva from yesterday, we see how he's been sort of like dealing with his own like introspection, which I find really interesting. Also, John Waters in this episode, if you've not seen this, great episode.
What?
The John Waters is in the new episode of Helluva. He plays this guy. He's this sort of creepy dude who runs a hotel. John Waters, I think, is a dude where if you like Helluva, you owe it to yourself to watch the films of John Waters, because there's a similar sort of subversion there of kind of, you know, nowadays a lot of queer representations, very nice, very wholesome, heart-stopper type beat, right? John Waters doesn't do any of that. It's filthy, it's violent, and it's kind of necessary. So, in Hazbin Hotel, we see a similar emphasis on redemption. In episode 6, we see Angel Dust's past put on trial, literally, in heaven. Now, Vivian has talked about this before. In a conversation with the LA Times, around the time Hazbin Season 1 dropped, she was asked about the show's stance on the war between good versus evil. And she said that the show was meant to represent that sort of gray area, that if you give people enough of sort of love and support and faith, that they can change, regardless of the things they've done in the past. I'm not sure I fully believe in that, but it's a nice idea, and I think the show really puts its sincere stakes on that idea. At the end of Season 1, we see that it is possible for a soul in hell to go to heaven. After Sir Pentious, that slippery, special little man, goes to heaven after sacrificing his life. For more on the show's themes, let's watch the final clip I had for you tonight. This is an interview with Vivian with Corey from the Double Toasted YouTube channel. So let's take a look.
You seem to love anthropomorphic animals and talking animals, and you seem to really be in love with hell. So, you know.
I love it. There's something about demonology that's just always been fun to me. And I'm not even, you know, it doesn't go past that. It doesn't go like I'm just fascinated with the whole aesthetic. You know, the kind of dark, the edgy. There's no such thing as a demon. So, like, when people are like, it doesn't look demon enough, I'm like, have you seen one? What do you reference? You know, like, yeah, because obviously there's a decoded demon, you know, like horns and red and all that, which, like, you know, I love playing into because it's fun. It's a fun aesthetic, but it doesn't exist. You know, that was created by some author somewhere, some illustrator somewhere down the line in the Renaissance, and then it just kind of was run with. Like, I do a lot of playing with different texts of hell and stuff, different interpretations, and I like kind of drawing from all of them. And with Hazbin, I'm pulling more from like the Lucifer story. So it's like Lucifer was a fallen angel, so he's supposed to be really pretty. So she's kind of like a porcelain doll, because she's the daughter of him. And Helluva's kind of a tied universe, so that one kind of shares that continuity. But I'm interested in theology. I'm interested in like mythos and Greek myth and Egypt myth and like all this stuff. And hell, like doing my own take on hell is kind of like my way of adapting more of like a grand theme than rather like specific myths, or like kind of looking at religious texts and kind of making commentary on them, but not really basing it too much in any kind of specific religious world. I've noticed and it goes back, and so many of my favorite shows and movies are about animals that represent something that isn't animals. Like, one of my favorite movies of all time is Cats Don't Dance, which is a movie about prejudice told through anthropomorphic animals and humans. And then there's also things like, and same with Roger Rabbit is another one, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which is my favorite movie. And, just there's a lot of, even BoJack, even more recent, like BoJack Horseman, has a way of, when you make a character anthropomorphic, there's just a way to digest what's happening and what the character's doing a little bit easier than if it's a full-on human, because it becomes a little too real when it's a human character. And then once there's some kind of layer of like, well, it's an animal, or it's a, like movies like Zootopia can also do it. Animals represent something very real, but we can kind of apply it in different contexts because, it's so broad. So that's one of the reasons why animals are in most of my projects, because they're a good storytelling device. There's a lot more of a grand appeal, and it takes things out of reality enough so that the stories you can tell can be darker or more real without it feeling too hard to digest, without it becoming, a live action drama that's very like, you either relate to the character or you don't. So.
Yeah, you're kind of like a satanic furry in a way,
Let's spend a few more minutes in hell tonight, if you will. Vivian touched on a major reason of why all the cartoons tonight focus on anthro animals. It's easy for us to identify with anthro animals. I mean, we're here, right? So at the same time, that framing puts us at a distance from the action where we can safely analyze topics, serious, heavy issues, without feeling too weighed down by them. And again, there are plenty of valid critiques you can throw at both Helluva Boss and Hazbin Hotel, and I think a lot of them are valid too. But I also think both shows add a new dimension to our understanding of furry hell. Like Eddie Adams with Pinky and Pepper, Vivian and the team at Spindle Horse have specifically imbued a queer, furry aesthetic onto our traditional Judeo-Christian ideas of hell. And as these shows' popularity has proven, there is such a major appetite for seeing anthro characters in hell singing and cursing and crying and cursing and laughing and cursing. Did I mention the cursing? But why is that? Why? Let's find out by circling back to everything we've talked about tonight. So, over the past hour, we have looked to the origins of hell iconography, watched how it's spread through decades of American anthro media, and we've analyzed what these depictions say about our own understandings of theology. Not everybody believes in hell. I don't, actually. Like, I've done this 3 times and I still don't. But in a world that seems to be rapidly hurtling towards some sort of collapse, check your voter registration soon, by the way. Putting furry characters in hell during a time like this allows us a safely abstracted way to grapple with very real worldly guilt we feel. Anthros aren't bound by the rules of science nor scripture. They react to impossible scenarios in the ways we hope we would, by escaping like Heifer, ridiculing the place like Fritz, or just being the most fabulous sinners in hell. So, why do we keep putting furries in hell? I think it's simple. We know they're going to make it. So, maybe we will too. Thanks.